Hello, and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have an amazing guest, JC Glick. JC is the CEO of the Commit Foundation. He is an author and TEDX speaker. He has earned 3 Bronze Stars, 3 Meritorious Service Medals, a Joint Commendation Medal, and the Order of St. Maurice. JC was recognized as a distinguished member of the 39th Infantry Regiment by the Chief of Staff of the Army and was inducted into the University of Rhode Island ROTC Hall of Fame. He is the Liberty Fellow, a part of the Aspen Institute and the Aspen Global Leadership Network. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome JC Glick.
Thank you so much. It always feels weird to hear those things because it doesn't feel like who I am, but thank you so much.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for your service. I definitely want to recognize that before we get started. Now, JC, as I was doing research for this conversation, which of course we did have our introduction, conversation as well, but truly you have accomplished so much in life. And I cannot wait to get right into this, talk about life, sport, and career. We are going to cover it all. So JC, if you don't mind beginning with an introduction and a background of yourself.
Yeah. So I graduated from the University of Rhode Island and went into the military. I was fortunate enough to spend most of my time in the 75th Ranger Regiment, and then the Asymmetric Warfare Group. I did 20 years. I was fortunate enough to do 11 combat tours. The transition in 2015, I got out and was a partner in a consulting firm, working with primarily professional sports teams and athletes and NCAA teams. I was, again, fortunate enough to write a couple of books that were picked up by a couple of large organizations. I did consulting for about 8 years, started my own company with a buddy of mine who was a professional coach. And, 2 years ago, I was lucky enough to come in to be asked to be a mentor for the Commit Foundation. And I saw what the Commit Foundation was doing. I immediately came home and told my wife, I don't know what I'm going to do with this organization, but I got to do something. Turned out they were looking for a CEO. Serendipity happened. And, I've been at Commit as the CEO for 2 years. It's an amazing team with an amazing mission. I think our job as we continue to move through life is how do we contribute to our ecosystem? And I don't look at that as accomplishments. I look at that as how are you giving back to the world? How are you continuing to have meaning to folks other than yourself? How are you providing something that brings betterment to the world? So I've been really fortunate that I've been allowed to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that introduction. And we are certainly going to jump into the Commit Foundation. But I could remember from our first conversation, we spoke about just the transitions in life that we experience. As you mentioned, you have worked with professional athletes. You too, coming out of the military, experienced that transition as well. And so I just want to reiterate this point, but 20 years as an infantry officer and over 11 combat tours. So extreme intensity. So when you focus on your approach to life coming out of the military, could you explain that transition and how you approached life after service?
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I did, which was kind of the wrong way to do it. And then I can tell you kind of what I've learned since then. So when I transitioned, for me, the first thing, and I think it's on everybody's mind, whenever they transition, and again, I don't think this is unique to the military. I'm just going to speak from that lens. You're looking for, okay, now how do I make money? Like, how do I do something else? And for me, I really wanted to prove myself outside of the military. I wanted to say, okay, I'm not a one-trick pony. I can do other things. So I didn't do anything I should have done, but I immediately was given a partnership and in a consulting firm and wrote a couple of books that did well. So now I go, okay, so I got a job and I was making money, more money than I had ever thought I could make. And I didn't know who I was. I didn't have a purpose anymore. And I ran so far and fast away from my community because I wanted to prove I could do things outside of my community that I was alone or I felt alone. And, I didn't work on those three important pieces. And because of that, I had some internal struggle. And that identity, you know, struggle happened even before I got out of the military because I went from, deploying all the time to a training role where, I really struggled to like, those weren't my people. That wasn't my purpose. That like, how do I identify? I was this ranger. I was a combat infantryman. I was all these things and I wasn't that thing there. And I struggled and had two suicide attempts while I was in uniform and then two when I got out of uniform. So despite what the resume said, despite what the world was seeing, I was in a very, very bad place. And, what I know now is when I started, and I just had a conversation with a transitioning vet yesterday. And I said, the first thing we got to do is figure out who we are. And our roles are not our identity, they're roles. And what's unfortunate is most of the literature out there today um, defines identity as roles, right? Your work identity, your family identity, your religion, your spiritual identity. And I personally think that's incorrect. I think our identity is value based. Who are we? And those things that and more important than who are we, because I think, and I believe time is a human construct. We're going to get like really abstract now, but whatever I think I am right now, it's over. Like it's done. It's gone. So who do I want to be? And if I think about who I want to be and I act in accordance with who I'd like to be, that becomes who I am. And those things are immaterial of role because all roles end, right? Every role that we have, and I say this somewhat from experience and somewhat, I hope it doesn't happen to others, but even the deepest roles that we hold, like being a father or mother or partner or husband or wife, those can all end. And what I don't want is to end before I do. So who I am, who I'd like to be, has to be values based. So for me, it's I want to be curious. I want to be innovative. I want to be kind. I want to be caring. I want to be empathetic. I want to be driven. That's who I am. What I do is what I do.
That is so true. I want to hold on to this because I think it's so important today. It seems like sometimes society will tell us like what we should do next. Like you said, like what identity are you? You're a student, then you become a professor, for example. But that idea of like kind of slowing down in life and being able, obviously in a fast-paced world, but slowing down and being able to look within, like you said, of focusing on values. And my question for you is you certainly mentioned values, but when you're coaching people, when you're helping people through that transition of life, like what does that look like when it comes to identifying the values, but then being able to help them in that next chapter of life?
Yeah, I think first it's about giving them that holding space to reflect and asking the questions, right? I think so often, from our school system on, right? It's all about giving answers. And I don't think that's helpful. I think the individuals have to come to their own answers. And I think it's providing the space and the safety of, okay, like what's important to you? Well, being a father. Okay, I got it. Why is that important to you? Why is being a father? Well, I get to take care of, okay, so giving to people is really important. Being there for someone else. Yes, right? So being able to kind of Sherpa them through that thought process because we're not really given the time to reflect. And I don't believe, I'm a kind of I believe in kind of the Jack Mesereau idea that no growth can come without reflection. So the ability to sit and think. And, it's interesting because I don't know that it has to be done slowly. I think it can be done pretty quickly if you ask the right questions and you're dedicated to thinking about it. But I think that there's a lot of noise and a lot of feedback loops that are getting in the way. This comparative analysis and what's somebody else doing and what are the expectations that society puts on you, like, and I think that's why sometimes we have this polarization of our identities become polarizing to, like, I'm a Republican. Well, I'm a Democrat. Well, okay. That's going to be a problem, right? I'm a Christian. I'm a Muslim. Well, there could be issues there as opposed to, look, I'm a person that believes this, regardless of any belonging that I have beyond that. This is what I believe. This is who I am, which means I can talk to anybody.
That's so true. Oh my goodness. And I really do. I want to focus on this for a second because this podcast, I have like 3 C's, if you will: communication, connection, and community. And this idea of pulling people together, of understanding how, even if there's differences and stuff, that we could still speak to one another. We could still work together with one another. And I think that's what's so important. And another point that you mentioned that I really liked was, when we slow down and we take time to think about like who we are as a person. I was thinking of themes that you were pulling out from becoming a father. Well, you're helping somebody else develop. There's actual themes or core elements, and how that could open up a widespread of doors when it comes to what that quote position looks like or that role looks like in the workplace, if you're focusing on eventually obviously getting back into one's career. But my next question still holds on to that like transition and that identity. But as you were coming out of the military, and you had just mentioned it too, you're CEO of Commit Foundation. And can you tell us just more about what that is all about, and just how you see it into the future, where it's headed?
Well, boy, I could talk forever on that because I love it. So Commit focuses on taking high potential veterans, spouses, member of the intelligence community, and members of allied forces, and high potential, think growth mindset, right? Carolyn Dweck kind of mindset, and helps them think about transition. And look, life is transitory, right? Life changes all the time. We get married, we get divorced, people die, kids go to school, they go to college, they become adults, right? I mean, all these things happen. And life is transitory. So transition is not a singular state, it's life. Life is constant transitions. But some transitions require transformation, meaning I have to rethink my meaning making for what the world looks like, because my way of knowing, my epistemic understanding of the world is different, right? I'm in the military, which is it's a certain way of knowing, right? And now I go into the civilian world, which is a different way of knowing. And I need to transform, otherwise I can't contribute. It's not about fitting in, it's about contributing, right? And so what we do is we focus on identity, purpose, and community. And we help people think about who they are, right? Because I'm telling you, and this isn't just military vets. This is, if I go and ask 100 people, tell me about yourself, they're going to start with their role first. I'm a senior vice president. I'm a barista. Right. It's what they do, right? Sometimes they'll think it's a little bit deeper. And I used to be as guilty of this. Well, I'm a father and I'm a husband. And those are all things that you do. And that's because it's uncomfortable to say, I try to be a kind person. I try to be a curious person. Like, people are going to look at you and go, like, what? Huh? But to know that is really important. And then, like, how do we look at purpose, right? We had this grandiose purpose, right? Support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Sometimes that was real. Like, sometimes I was counting weapons in the arms room. Like, that was my purpose in the moment. So for me, purpose became about, what is my purpose in every single moment? And then community, we're given a community. The day you come into the military, you are given a community. These are your people. And out in the world, and it's a great gift, right? I mean, think about this. For people who come into the military, there's this tremendous gift of, here's your identity, here's your purpose, and here's your community. Those are the 3 things that every human needs. And you're given that. It's a great gift. Unfortunately, when we leave, we lose all that in 24 hours. It's over. You are not this thing anymore. This is not your mission anymore. And these are not your people anymore. So now I got to go find out okay, so who am I? What's important? And who are my people? And so that can be difficult. So commit really focuses on helping people. Who are you? How do we find you a new purpose? And again, your purpose doesn't have to be grandiose. Mine's not. In fact, I don't believe in grandiose purposes, right? My purpose is in every single moment of it. Sometimes it's taking out the garbage. Sometimes it's feeding the dogs. That's my purpose. That's what I got to do to serve my ecosystem. And then who are your people? And we have a very robust network where we can really introduce our fellows to very senior, thoughtful people who can help them and mentor them as they continue to transition. And a tertiary outcome of that is a lot of our folks come out and they meet somebody who goes, I want to hire you, or I know a person who wants to hire you. And now we're at a time where I'm getting senior leaders calling me weekly going, hey, do you have anybody who could fill this role? And yes, I have like 5 people who could fill that role. So, we face this really weird paradox coming out of the military where it's thank you for your service. You're a hero, but you're low skill, you're low wage, and you have no experience. And your way of knowing is not our way of knowing, and it's not important. I've had people say, like, JC, what do you really know how to do? You know how to kill people. And so we find this epistemic exile where our way of knowing is not valued, which can then cause us to withdraw from society because we don't think people really like it's very thank you, but we're not going to help you. And it's not from a negative place. It's just like other people have lives and we get that. But we have to start seeing those that come out of the military as individuals who are not civilians, they're citizens, right? Civilians consume, citizens contribute. And these are people who can absolutely contribute to the ecosystems that they go into. And we've done the research and we're talking, in economic activity, we're talking billions of dollars that our fellows alone, and we're talking our fellows are like 7,000 over 10 years, but billions of dollars in economic activity, billions of dollars in earned income. And then we talk about hundreds of thousands of people that have been impacted by them on conservative numbers that have been impacted by these people who understand their identity, understand their purpose, and look for their community.
Absolutely. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of how I mean, it's kind of, I guess, in society, but like how we hold on to like even titles, like levels of education. And like you said, when you're applying to a job, like how much experience do you have? Like 2 to 3 years of experience. And what's interesting is what I'm seeing now, just reading like a couple articles, but even with the infiltration of like AI, like full force now, a lot of employers are actually saying, hold on, we will actually teach you the technical skills, but what we need are soft skills. And so I'm just wondering from your perspective, as you're talking about that, maybe they don't literally have the specific experience, but my goodness, they know structure, they know responsibility, discipline, which could certainly translate into success in the workplace. Where do you kind of see, it's a little bit of a tangent question, but where do you kind of see that mind shift of when you are applying to a job that the qualifications are actually maybe going to shift in a different direction to value those?
I think it's imperative that employers start to do that. And there's a lot of research about generalists being exceptional and being really successful. I'm going to tell you that if you hire a veteran, everybody thinks, oh, I hire a veteran. They show up on time and they do what they're told and they're disciplined. Most of the time, what they think is discipline is really just obedience. They follow the rules. And quite honestly, if that's your bar for entry, like they do what they're told to do, like that's a pretty low bar. That should be all good employees. I think what you get from veterans is they know they're used to being part of something that's larger than themselves. So these are individuals who are not motivated by a paycheck. They're motivated by mission accomplishment. They're motivated by teamwork. They're motivated by collaboration. They want to problem solve. They're incredible problem solvers. They're adaptive. They don't just do one thing. There's this weird, I remember talking to somebody at a consulting firm that I won't name because they'll get upset. But I was advising them and they said, well, you came from the military and everybody, it's just draconian there. And I said, I got to be honest with you, you all are way more draconian than I found in the military, because rarely did I say, do this, go here. I said, hey, at the end of the day, we need it to look like this. And people figured it out. Right. And I think that's something that we have to change, that mentality of like this orders top based. Privates are thinking at the lowest level. They're thinking, they're taught to problem solve, not taught to just do what they're told. They have to figure it out, because the battlefield, it's this dancing landscape, right? It's changing constantly. So what worked yesterday is not going to work tomorrow. And so we don't do things the same way. We have to change it up. And that's something that veterans bring. And I hear senior leaders like, oh, I have a problem with collaboration. I have a problem with, people being behind the mission. Yeah, they're not like, what are you doing to bring that into the team? Veterans, the minute they show up, that's what they bring.
So true. And, even as I reflect, like you said, the teamwork, the mission, it kind of goes back to our first conversation when how do we find that sense of like purpose after transition, the values? It's the larger picture. And I just want to like highlight that part because I do feel the value, like you said, of what veterans bring is so much more than what sometimes companies are asking for. Like you said, like 2 to 3 years of experience in XYZ, but it has to be this and it can't be the big picture. But when you are able to, especially as an employee in any organization, but being able to look at the broader, like through a broader lens, should I say, and what is the ultimate vision? What are you trying to accomplish? But each day, those tasks, you find deep meaning and fulfillment, which I think some people struggle with if they don't have that sense of fulfillment. Like, what do these tasks actually have to do with the end result? When there's a disconnect there, I think that's why you see burnout, like extreme, kind of like we see today. Some of the statistics are mind boggling. So,
Yeah,
it,
no, I agree. And I think there's a resilience that comes from military folks. Look, you got to tell them the why, but once you tell them the why, they're off. They're figuring it out. And it's funny because, I talk to, veterans that on paper are so much better than I am. And, like a guy will say, well, I was just a ship driver. You were selected to command $1 billion piece of equipment. There's no manual on it. There's no like, here's how you do it. It's just, okay, we trust you to take this $1 billion piece of strategic equipment and do the right thing. And that you tell me a CEO that doesn't want that type of person in their organization, whether that's a submarine commander, a Top Gun pilot, a mechanic on Black Hawk helicopters, where, this enlisted guy, again, well, they were enlisted, they have low education. This is somebody who a bunch of officers trusted with their lives every single day. This is somebody who's going to make everything work. And we get this, and again, I think there's this disconnect, this civilian military gap, this divide that exists where they just, what they know about the military is from movies or something their friends told them or what they've read in the media. And you sit there and you're like, but have you talked to a military person? Do you really know what they bring?
hold on to this because I really am. I'm so passionate about this. Like, how do we make that change? Like, what do you think needs to happen to educate individuals as far as the high quality traits that veterans do possess? Like, how do we make this change in corporations and organizations?
So I think that that we who can translate that need to start to say to for years what we've done is tell military folks, hey, look, you're like 1% of the population. You've got to change your resume to fit what they're doing. And I disagree with that. My thought is let's get groups of people out there who are educating and saying, look, here's what you're looking at. Like, this is what this person's bringing to the table. If you see this, this is what they've done. So that senior leaders can start to go, wait, I need a person that's this. In the first place they look, it's not HBS. It's, hey, who's getting out of the military? And I think, when I look at the folks, and we have a lot of folks, right, that go on and get their MBAs and their doctorates, et cetera, but they they don't need that to necessarily succeed at the next level. And let me give you an example. And I'm going to call these people out by name because I think this highly of them. So there's a company called Landmark Construction in Georgia, and they're a great company. And I'm going to tell you from a personal lens. My son, who played football at the University of South Carolina and played lacrosse there, he graduated with a degree in broadcast journalism. And he did it for 6 months and he went, "Oh, this is horrible. I don't want to do this." So he leaves. And, he's trying to figure out what he wants to do again: identity, purpose, community, right? There, like he's trying to figure it out. And he finds through a friend, he finds Landmark Construction. They hire him on as like and project engineer, which is like the lowest level, right? And he comes in and he's been there like 2 years. He's been promoted 3 times. Okay. He does not have PMP certification, but he is now a project manager for Landmark Construction. And I look at that and I go, that's a company that gets it, right? They're not looking at capability, meaning what are the certificates? What are the degrees? What's the experience? They're looking at capacity. What can this person do? When they do it, let's reward that. Let's show, like, yes, let's continue. Now, some of his peers have gone to school to study project management and construction, and he is learning on the fly. He's figuring it out. And does that say something about my son? Sure. I think he's awesome. And it says a lot about the company because the company is saying, oh, okay, this person can do that. So let's continue to develop this person and raise their capacity because they have the capacity to lead. More companies need to think like that. And we certainly, commit. We have partnerships with Blackstone and we have partnerships with Workday and we have partnership with some great companies that understand the capacity is more important than capability. But it's funny, like we'll go into a workshop and I'll say to the veterans, how many of you have your PMP certification? They all raise their hands. And I go, so you want to be a project manager? And they're like, no, I hate that. So why did you get this certification? Well, because that's what we have to get in the civilian world. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's a certificate.
See, the more that we're speaking about this, it does seem we've done things for such a long period of time the same way. And, when it comes to qualifications for certain positions, I think not even in relation to technology that's really kind of shifting things on the whim, but how we do need to rethink almost how we're doing things, how we're hiring people, how we view people. Is it through a lens of what values, what their character is? Or is it, like you said, that certificate? Oh, you don't have this degree. Sorry, you can't even apply. Because that's some cases, like you cannot even
Sure.
apply? But this is, oh my goodness, I could go on and on with that. But I want to recognize which kind of like speaks to it. But you have a TEDx talk out there. Okay. I'm so excited. Congratulations on that. That is the ultimate accomplishment for public speaking, especially in that niche area of expertise. And your TEDx talk was focused on rethinking leadership. So could you maybe let us in on that?
So I think that traditional leaders have a tendency to think about the task that needs to be accomplished. And I think that's the wrong focus for leaders. I think they have to know what the task is and then they have to forget about it and because they're not doing it. Right. So through the talk, what I talk about is what's stopping people from doing the task. And at the end of the talk, what I talk about is, look, there's a way to be an inspirational leader. And, when we look at, and the difference between inspiration and motivation is I can motivate in a bad way, right? If you don't do this, you're fired. In fact, even when I do it, what I think is positive, like, hey, if you do this, I'm going to give you a raise. Well, that's actually still fear-based because if I don't do it, I'm worried about not getting the raise, right? So motivation is completely fear-based. Positive or negative motivation is fear-based. It's the idea of conservation of resources. Like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid I'm going to lose this, or I'm afraid I'm not going to get this. So if we provide what, if we give them fear to counter fear, eventually their fear of whatever the thing we're asking them to do is going to be greater than the fear of not getting or getting the thing that we're motivating with. So the idea is, if we inspire, which is simple, from my perspective, it's providing hope. Hey, what I'm asking you to do is worth doing and you can do it. And trust, I'm going to be here with you. I'm going to resource you and I'm going to help you think through this. If we provide hope and trust in a constant of fear, we have inspirational leadership. And if we focus on that, the task always gets done. I can think of, over 1,000 missions. I don't think I ever thought about the completion of the mission. I thought about how am I providing hope and trust to the folks that are going to execute this mission. That's my job. And if leaders focus on that, they become so much more effective.
So true. And I was just having this conversation, but when you talk about like hope and trust in today's world, I mean, arguably uncertainty is really at the forefront. What is this technology, for example, going to do? But to have leaders who are in places where they're encouraging their, if it's employees or team members, but with that sense of hope and trust, and not to mention too, I was thinking about this, but having a sense of like psychological safety in those environments, especially where the need for innovation is becoming that much more quicker and faster. And I just think about that, like how does a company stay relevant? How do they stay just kind of up on the next thing? But you have to have a leader who's willing to, like you said, trusting the employees that if in fact they do make a mistake, which may not happen every single time, but that it is okay that we learn from that mistake and that we move forward and that we don't hinder them constantly with a reminder like, hey, you made a mistake here. Now we can't move forward. But I think that hope, trust, and that sense of like psychological safety, I'm so happy you mentioned those two elements, though I think are so important in today's environment.
Absolutely. I think that, it's not if they're going to make a mistake, it's when they're going to make a mistake. And is it a mistake born of negligence, meaning they knew the right thing or they decided to cut a corner? Like those are different. But if you make a mistake, but it wasn't for negligence, yeah, I'm underwriting it. Like, yep, okay, what did we learn? How do we make sure it never happens again? Let's keep going. And that, like, how leaders react to mistakes matters, because if you want to grow, and I think, most leaders want to grow, and you want to stay relevant, especially, I mean, right now, right? I encourage my folks, like, play with AI, use it. Tell us how you're using it. We have a whole Slack channel that's, hybrid intelligence. How are we using it? What worked? What didn't work? What mistakes have we made? And you make a mistake and I go, okay, so how do we fix that? Or did you fix it? Great. Okay. How do we make sure we don't do that again? Great. Keep going. And that's really, really important. And the other piece, and there's a balance here, but I make a lot of mistakes, right? I mean, there's no manual for what any of us do. So we're going to make missteps. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to do the wrong thing. I'm going to react instead of respond. I'm going to make a misstep and I own it. And I go, hey, I screwed this up. Here's how I'm going to fix it in the future. And, I think that if you show that, if you demonstrate that, I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Like that sense of, you're right, leading by example. I mean, all the leaders in individuals who have led me, whether it was in workforce or if it was a coach, but the ones that I really hold just in like high esteem is the ones who were willing to educate me, to be present, really in that moment of, especially as technology has developed over the years, but undivided attention, really invested in the growth of an individual, of an employee, team member, etc. But yes, if you did make a mistake, what happened? let's learn from it and move forward. I think that's so important. And my next question actually kind of transitions into education, but you are currently getting your doctorate. Like I said, what have you not accomplished yet, JC? This is incredible. But tell us all about like what particular area you're headed into and why you chose that particular area.
Yeah. So I do. So at some point we've got to come back to lead by example because I don't think there's any. Don't think it exists. So that's and that tends to be a real provocative conversation. But so I am getting a doctorate at Columbia University in adult development and leadership, and so it's kind of funny how things work out. The truth is, my wife and I sat down and we looked at our lives and we said, okay, what do we want to look like in 5 years and 10 years? And I said, I'd really like to teach um, at the graduate level. And it was, well, you got to you got to have a doctorate to do that. I'm like, all right, so I'll go get a doctorate. And so there was a program at Columbia that was a special cohort program, full time. I didn't realize that it was selective. I mean, I knew Columbia was selective, but I didn't know that this was a separate thing. And I was like, oh, this kind of fits my schedule. I'm going to apply to that. Um, and I will tell you that it is probably it's first of all the best academic experience I've ever had in my life. I don't like I can't even compare it. It is absolutely amazing. And I have gotten so much out of it, not just academically, but as a human. The things that I've learned, the people that I've interacted with, both my classmates, but especially my faculty, um, I am just blown away. And I'm a better human. I'm a better partner. I'm a better father. I'm a better boss because of the things that I have learned in this academic journey. I couldn't, and the things that I've been able to research and study and read and my growth has just been so it was kind of a, hey, this will fit, so I'll go do it. And man, boy, talk about serendipity. It was just the right thing at the right time. I couldn't be happier.
That's absolutely incredible. I mean, to pursue a doctorate, obviously, terminal degree, I mean, the highest that you could go, but just the amount of challenge that it provides a human being. And I say this because I think what's so interesting is that when we go into these degree programs, yes, of course, we're going to learn that specific, topic or subject. But as you were mentioning, how it allows the human being to actually grow as a person, the personal growth, the personal development. I mean, I think of limits that I had internally put on myself as far as even like how late can I stay up to finish this paper? And I was blown away of realizing, wow, you should never put a limit on yourself because I had no clue I could do that and I still managed it. How? And so my follow-up question to that is like, what specific lesson other than like the research and the topic matter that you're, researching right now, but that you've learned as far as personal growth?
I think understanding, development theory, adult development theory, and really internalizing it and looking at reflection and looking at experimentation and understanding action learning by Victoria Marsick and really and not just the theory, but putting it into practical application, right? It's about being an academic practitioner. And being an academic is great. I mean, we need those people. That's terrific. But I think you have to put it into practice, right? It's kind of like philosophy. Philosophy doesn't mean anything unless you put it into practice, right? Thinking for thinking's sake, maybe. I mean, if you have the time and the resources and you can do that, how lovely that must be. But but philosophy is important because it helps us act. And so what I see is, okay, I'm learning all this stuff. I'm holding it and I'm saying, oh no, I need to do this. This is how I need to, am I challenging my assumptions? Am I looking at this through the right lens? Am I recognizing, and being able to also, at my age, I think you know a lot of this stuff, but you don't have the scaffolding that says, oh, well, this actually comes from here. So it's being able to kind of put terminology to what you know and being able to say like, oh, okay, this is what that means. And the other thing and the humility that's involved in being able to say like, yeah, I really don't know a lot of stuff. There's so much stuff out there. And, you learn like I'm a constructivist, right? So I see the world differently, whereas somebody who's a realist may go, yeah, that's not how the world is. And neither one of us is wrong. And to be able to do that is both humbling and has absolutely again, had helped me grow as a human to go, oh, they see the world differently than I do. And their reality is not my reality. And that's okay. So now I get to think about their reality and come from it at a place that's not judgmental, that's more thoughtful.
I think that's so important, the point that you make just about even becoming curious, understanding where we certainly have strengths, but maybe where we fall short in addressing that. Like you said, maybe taking an extra deep dive in a specific area of research, like you said. But I think that's like the key today. I've been really thinking about like how do we pull people together, like as far as diverse perspectives and well, you believe this way and I believe this way. Like just like you started our conversation, because there's so much truth to that. But like how do we come together? How do we appreciate one another? Like you said, I mean, just a variety of different backgrounds, cultures, but how we could appreciate their journey and how, yes, we may have been brought up in a certain way, but we could still see life and through their lens, so to speak. And I think that's so important because it extends outwards from academia, what you're learning in the classroom. But like you said, that practicality, how does this relate to the real world where literally when we talk about community, how could we pull people back together and really form that sense of positive community for next generations coming through? I think is so important. And kind of on this topic, but through your lived experience and in military, now leading the Commit Foundation, but how has that maybe either changed your approach or maybe even just formed your approach to leadership and service?
It's probably continued to muddy it more, right? Because the more I realize that, man, okay, so everything's integrated, everything's tied together. Okay, this person is looking from a different lens than this person. How do I make sure that this person sees and balance all that with the expectations of the organization, right? A, a lot of a lot of academic practitioners are like, oh, we got to meet people where they are and help them develop. And I still have a responsibility to accomplish some goals. And I can't afford to meet everybody where they are. Like that's kind of even in my program. And I would argue, I don't know that there's any place that meets people exactly where they are. There's always an expectation of a standard to get in. Right. So whether that's academically, I mean, before I was an undergrad, like in elementary school, high school, I was a horrible student. Nobody met me where I was. I either passed barely or I failed. There was no like meet JC where he is, teach him the way he needs to be taught. It was, hey, figure it out. When I went to college, there was nobody meeting. There was an expectation. There are expectations in the world. I can't meet everybody where they're at. And so I think that's not necessarily really helpful language. I think it's a great idea. I understand the concept. And it's not even in my organization, which is a nonprofit business. But if you don't have a growth mindset, I can't help you. So kind of the bar to get in is you've got to have a growth mindset. So I can't, if you're in a place where maybe you're still struggling with some stuff, I can't meet you there. Like I can talk to you there and I can recommend like, hey, maybe you need to go here first, but you're not ready to do this. And there's that's not a bad thing. We keep like, we got to meet everybody where they are. When your plumber comes into your house and he's screwing it up, do you go, well, meet him where he's at? No, you want your plumber to do the job. That's it. And that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And the person that's not there yet, There's nothing wrong with them either. I've kicked people out of the military. And here's what I said. First, I apologized because I said, look, I don't think we have the leadership capacity to lead you. That's on us. That's not on you. We can't get you to do what we need you to do. I'm sorry about that. And just because we're kicking you out of the military, we don't think you'll be a good soldier. It doesn't mean you're not a good person. That doesn't mean you won't be great at something else. It just means you're not good at this right now. And we don't, and unfortunately there are resource limitations. And I don't know, we don't even know if the Army has the right person to lead you. So you're going to go do something else and you'll do great. I hope. But I think that's okay. And we make it this like, I wasn't trying to shame them. I wasn't like, you're not right for this. This is a hard job. Not everybody can do it.
And it reminds me of high school when I realized like chemistry, biology, as much as I wanted to go into medicine, that was a harsh reality check, and I think it's to that very point, like even in sport, and sometimes people certainly this could be like more controversial, but I really do. I grew up in sport, and I think it's so important when we talk about like, everybody has medals or everybody gets a trophy, but how important it actually is for like internal, like that intrinsic motivation to become even better at whatever you're in as far as like sport goes. But I know growing up, I mean, it was first, second, third, and that's who made the podium and that's what you accepted. But I also think too, the times that I did not make the podium or I did not make a lineup, boy, like it fueled a fire in me to rest assured that I was going to make that lineup next time. So I think it's a very applicable thought process in academia, in sport, in life, quite frankly, because it motivates you to become a better person than the day before, if you will. And so, JP,
I think it is important. Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think we look at failure or not making that podium as something negative, as opposed to every loss is only a loss if I don't learn. Every failure is only a failure if I don't learn. I might not have reached the objective I wanted to, and there may be consequences for that, but I can get better from that. And I will tell you, I literally shared with a teammate recently. I turned in paper. I'm used to doing pretty well on papers, and I did well, but I got a lot of comments, and I went, "Oh, I don't like this at all." And I literally like rewrote it and resubmitted it, and I said, "You don't even have to look at this, but I want to learn from what you said. I want to correct these things." And it wasn't about the grade. It was about, oh no, I have some gaps here and I want to fix those gaps. And I think that came from like, I lose a lot. I fail a lot. Like it's funny. You said something. And as I sit here and think about it, I've accomplished a lot. I've failed way, way more than I've accomplished anything. I'm good with that. Like the failure has allowed me to actually complete some stuff. And I hate when I see people not even try. There was zero thought in my mind that Columbia was going to accept me. Zero. But I still applied because the application cost nothing. And if I didn't get accepted, I would have figured out something else. And I think that we have to learn to take those kind of risks and learn from them and the right thing and trust that if you're working, the right thing will happen.
Absolutely. And as you were speaking, it reminds me of just like lessons we learn along the way. Like you said, when you got that paper back and there was a ton of comments, and I was actually chuckling over here because I've had that happen to me, especially in my PhD program. And it's humbling. I thought I was actually a good writer. And then it really does. It actually kind of sets you back to reassess to how do you become, if it is a better writer, or if it is, you have to, pull in more research, whatever, but to get to that next level. So when you talk about humility, when you talk about this continuation of learning and striving for excellence, question, just as I'm speaking, what do you feel like if you could name 3 traits or characteristics of an individual for leadership today? I'm going to keep it very broad, just in the workforce. Like, what would you say that they should focus on today?
It's great. I have 4 actually. Um, it's curiosity, empathy, humility, and loyalty. And so I wrote about that in my second book, and I did the research. And if you look at truly successful leaders, they had all 4 of those. They might not have had some of the other stuff that people will throw out. If I ask 100 people, give me leadership characteristics, they're going to give you, integrity is going to come up, and selfless service and all this other stuff. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that if you look at great inspirational leaders across history, they were curious. They asked questions, right? I will tell you, as a leader, in any meeting I'm in, the first thing out of my mouth is always a question. It's never an answer, ever. Um, Humility. I don't mean the Christian Judeo humility. I mean, the aw shucks, I'm not good at that. It's okay to say you're good at stuff. It's the idea of, it doesn't have to be my way. There might be a better idea out there. There's other ideas that could be better than mine. And I don't want to be the smartest guy in the room. Empathy. I've got to be able to imagine what it's like to be someone else. And then not only imagine it, but true empathy is an action, right? Because I've got to say, boy, I can imagine that, being a Division I gymnast was like really, really, hard on your body. Is that right? Right? I need to ask. Like, otherwise I'm just walking around with my story. And that's not true empathy. Like, a lot of people think, like, I'm empathetic, I can imagine what it's like to be. Well, did you ask? Right? Because maybe it wasn't hard on their body. It was hard mentally more, or they'll go. I remember asking I worked with a law firm, and all the partners were white males. And she was a woman of color. And I said, I can imagine you might not see a path to partnership in this organization. She goes, no, I totally see a path to partnership. I get it wrong. So empathy's got to be active. It's got to include that curiosity piece. And then loyalty. And it's not to an idea. It's not to an ideal. It's not to even an organization. It's loyalty to people. Right. And that doesn't mean not firing people. Sometimes the most loyal thing I can do is tell you, this is the wrong place for you. And that's a good thing. That's a gift, because now you can go find the right place for you. Because I can tell you, this isn't the right place for you right now.
Wow. Okay. So the curiosity part, I am all about that today because, like I said, I feel like things are changing so rapidly. Even, for example, I speak about this a lot, but even with certain titles or degrees, they're essentially like static. Like, you really do have to be up with the next articles that are coming out, focusing on like foresight, what could potentially happen when it comes to innovation. But really, it all begins with a sense of curiosity, a curiosity to ask questions. But I like that you mentioned the 4 characteristic traits. My question for you is, we spoke about it a lot, but I just want to kind of emphasize this point. If people who are listening, if they're going through maybe a different transition in life that could be, in fact, military, athletic, in personal life, but like, what role specifically does self-awareness, where you're actually at in that moment, and then also reflection play when it comes to maybe transitioning in a successful way?
So I think self-awareness is really important, but it's not done alone. I always look, this is a team. Life is a team sport. Okay. Life is a team sport. We don't accomplish anything by ourselves. And so you can think you're self-aware. You better go check that with somebody, because you could be wrong. And I think that's really, really important, is to have a community of trusted advisors, Sherpas, whatever it is, right? That helps you think about, like, well, I think I'm this. How do you see it? Or I think I'm good at this, or I think this is important to me. And allowing them to give you some exercise. So we have an exercise in Commit where we ask somebody, like, hey, what are your most important values? And then we have them describe their perfect day. And then we ask them, what values showed up in your perfect day? And sometimes none of the values did. Okay, that's all right. So which is different? Is it your perfect day? Or is it your values? Which is not necessarily correct, and usually they go back and they're like, I think my values might have been wrong. Okay, because you're telling me what's important to you, but it's not showing up in the same place. And I think you need a partner in those things, right? I mean, I think the idea, and I disagreed with the concept. The mayor of New York City recently said, this strong individualism has to be replaced by community, and I disagree with that. I think we need strong individualism. I think what each person brings to the table is essentially important, and we need to do it together for each other. So I think it's got to be, if you're going through a transition, who's your trusted advisors? Who are your people that you're going to and going, I want to see if I got this right. I want you to challenge me. I want you to, I want to help. I want help thinking about it.
So true. Yeah, never be afraid to ask for help, and I think that's for anybody out there, not just, I mean, I was thinking about it. I know when I was coming out of college, that whole athletic identity we spoke about. Oh my goodness. Like, I thought I had it all figured out, and I didn't. I had no clue, but to reach out to a support system could certainly help you as you transition into various, like I said, transitions throughout life. But JC, this has been a phenomenal podcast episode. Really just so grateful for you to come on here, share your knowledge and your wisdom. But I would love to round it out with a positive message or a positive quote for the community.
So I sign off almost all my emails with let's go, because I am a deep thinker, but without action, nothing happens. So let's go. Like, let's take that first step. Let's not wait. Let's not wait for somebody else. Let's not wait to be told to do it. Let's not wait because we're scared. Let's go.
Fantastic. That is super motivating because, like you said, I mean, we need to think things through, but also it's about taking action. If we don't take action and time goes by us, I mean, tomorrow's never promised. So I love that. Take action. JC, it has been an absolute honor to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. And anytime, I would love to continue these conversations.
Absolutely. Thank you, JC.